So I want to start with our first panelist, who's Stephen Phipson, CBE, Chief Executive at Make UK. Now, Make UK is the main representative voice of UK manufacturing. And prior to joining Make UK, Stephen was head of the Defence and Security Organisation within the Department for International Trade. In addition to senior roles within UK government, Stephen has spent 35 years in industry and has held senior roles within electronics, defence and security industries, and has a deep understanding of international trade. So great to have you with us, Stephen.
Good morning, Paul. I can't start my video either by the look of it. It says the host is in control at this point, so you just have to listen to my voice, I think.
That's the important bit, I think, for today, the very important bit. Thank you. Our second panelist is David Keenan. I can see David, so his video is working. David's from Nimbus, who are very much hands-on investors. David has a background in corporate banking and finance across the north of England. Whilst at PwC, he originated and advised on a number of significant mid-market private equity transactions across a wide range of sectors, including manufacturing. He's since moved to Nimbus to specialize in an area he enjoys, identifying opportunities across the UK, building on his management team relationships to develop Nimbus' hands-on approach. Now, David sits on the board of UK manufacturers Paralloy Limited and Custom Made Group. So welcome, David, and it's great to have a manufacturer's viewpoint today.
Thanks, Paul.
There we go. Great to see you. And our third and final panelist from today is Tom McGrath from Export Unlocked. Now, Tom has spent his entire professional career in the Irish Customs and Excise Service, retiring as the head of their Customs Audit Unit in Large Cases Division. He's since taken up an appointment as National Customs and Trade Compliance Manager for one of the world's leading freight and logistics companies. And interestingly, during his career, he spent 4 years as an auditor and investigator with the European Commission in Brussels and has travelled extensively. Tom, thanks for joining us, and given your background and experience, I'm sure we're all interested to hear your views today.
Thank you, Paul. Unfortunately, the time constraints won't allow me to go through the contents of my recent book, but we'll plow on.
You've given us a picture to look at anyway, Tom. So that's fantastic. Thanks very much.
Paul. Similar, Stephen. I'm having difficulties starting the video.
Yeah, don't worry about it. We'll go with it on a verbal basis anyway, and hopefully the colleagues in the background can overcome these technical challenges as we go. But just moving on, because time is against us a little bit. We won't have the opportunity for the people in the breakout room to ask questions, but you can pose those to the sector experts for the Q&A session that follows. But I've set a theme for our panelists today. The UK manufacturing sector is the engine behind our international trade. So the exam question I posed in advance, but we're going to go into this in a little bit more detail, was how have the challenges of 2020 impacted on the sector, and where do you see the opportunities for growth into 2020 and beyond? And the subliminal message, I guess, is how can Santander support this growth, which we'll get into post today's event. But Stephen, if I can come to you first of all, sure. The findings from the Trade Barometer show that businesses remain surprisingly optimistic about future growth. 59% of businesses are confident for growth over the next 3 years, is what the survey is telling us. Perhaps you could let us have what Make UK's current view on the sector is, and what's your outlook for the future?
Sure. So Paul, you're quite right. There's been an uptick in confidence. I think when we go through this every 2 weeks, so we're surveying thousands of manufacturers every 2 weeks. We're talking to them in our regional boards, and basically there's been, I think, a real sense of optimism of exiting the lockdown period. That was something in the recent data that comes through quite strongly. People, although many manufacturers continue to trade, albeit at a much lower economic activity level, I can start my video now. Throughout the lockdown, it was some sectors were affected more than others. So we had, for example, commercial aerospace in real difficulty, automotive in real difficulty, but other areas like food and drink, defense manufacturing, medical device manufacturing, powering ahead, in many cases sustaining growth year on year on where they were before. So a real patchy view. But I think, generally speaking, if we look at the totality of it, we saw a big boost in confidence when the end of the lockdown was coming into sight, and people were thinking that was very, very positive. However, if we look underneath that, there is still an underlying concern about the general economy in the UK, what that's going to look like going forwards, and then some of the other things we've got in front of us. There's now, as we are going through week by week detailed work with governments on the arrangements at the end of the transition period with the EU, we're starting to see a lot more bureaucracy is going to be introduced, a lot more cost to business, which is very much the opposite of the vision that we were given a couple of years ago. And people are worried about those challenges, given that 50% of the exports of manufactured goods go to the EU. So people are worried about that sort of thing at the moment going forwards. And it's reflecting a little bit in the investment numbers. And you've seen some of that data come through in your Trade Barometer. We're seeing about a 22% reduction year on year. The data is showing us in terms of investment intentions at the moment, which is not untypical. So those of us that have been through these kind of recessionary periods in the past, around 2008 and before that, actually, this is a very typical trend. People stop investment whilst they try and preserve cash and work through where they're going to be in the future. The other thing to bear in mind, of course, many companies have taken on debt during the lockdown, and so are reluctant to take on more debt for investment. So that's another factor that's sort of impeding that growth there. But I would say, in a longer term, manufacturers tend to be optimistic, Paul, and I think there is a trend of optimism. I think we will adapt to whatever the new environment's going to be. We do see some. We probably don't see as much enthusiasm for some of the international trade deals as the minister reflected today. I'm not sure how much we're going to export to New Zealand in terms of manufactured goods, but certainly it's something that's very much supported by manufacturers, and I think most people are just really intrigued and fascinated to find out where we end up with negotiations with the EU, bearing in mind that's, in terms of proximity of business, that's our largest trading partner. So there's just some aspects there, Paul, of the flavour of things that are coming through on the surveys at the moment.
Thanks, Stephen. Quite a balanced view there. Yes, I think your comments about some of the trade deals resonate with others, albeit the Trans-Pacific Agreement that Minister Stewart mentioned would be welcome and unlock a few more opportunities for us. But yes, there's a little bit more pessimism around than those immediate figures predict. David, coming to you now, and taking it probably on a slightly more downbeat note, the Trade Barometer results show that business performance has deteriorated as expected, as only 32% of businesses say that their business performance has improved. And as Stephen just mentioned, business investment remains severely depressed. As a manufacturer, how has 2020 been for you, and what are your medium-term plans?
So I'd say, as for everyone, 2020 has been a pretty surreal year. Nimbus typically invests in traditional economy businesses, so manufacturing, industrial, engineering, a bit of food and beverage. And in the last 12 months, we've invested in 3 UK manufacturers, a textiles business, a specialist steel alloys business, and a fenestration manufacturer, so a real mix. The latest of which we completed in end of June, early July during lockdown, which was a challenging to complete a transaction with only being to site a couple of times is interesting. But in addition to that, we've recently sold Halo Foods, which is the Santander relationships we have, to the next stage of its growth journey. So that was a manufacturer of cereal bars, really sort of tremendous couple of years and continued strong performance this year. And there was a real significant appetite for the business for investment from both international trade and both international and UK private equity. But if I take Paraloy as an example for 2020, which, as I say, manufactures specialist steel alloys to petrochemical, hydrogen, industrial gas turbines, defence, aerospace, so a mix of some of the sectors that Stephen touched on as positive and some of them that are slightly more challenging. Our medium-term plans are really exciting. We've seen a very strong demand from overseas sales, with over 80% of our customers are already based outside the UK, so worldwide. And lots of people are talking about some of the sectors that are winning, so IT and healthcare. But as a manufacturer, we're very upbeat in terms of the opportunities for our business going into 2021. part of this year's challenge has been supply chain, with items in territories coming from areas such as the Far East in the early part of the year, Italy and Spain, late winter, early spring, and then locally in the UK with some of our subcontractors furloughing their team during our spring-summer lockdown. That was challenging for us to get product out the door because we didn't have the component parts to manufacture it. But as we move into 2021, that seems to be a level of normality now, and people are understanding of the challenge that everyone's faced in terms of that supply chain. So for Parallel in particular, we're extremely excited about the opportunities for 2021 and working with our international partners to continue to grow that export relationship.
Well, it's great to hear. Even though I framed the question in a downbeat tone, it's great to hear that there are some positives there from the manufacturing businesses that you work with. Interesting, you mentioned supply chains. If time allows, we'll get to supply chain resilience and planning towards the end, as I say, if we can. But let's move on to Tom now. Tom, alongside the negotiations on our exit from the EU, the Trade Barometer is showing that UK SMEs believe that there are two key barriers to international trade, regulatory changes and bureaucracy, which we heard Julia talk about earlier. So a bit of a multi-part question from me, I suppose. So what stance does Export Unlocked take on these points, and what support is available for business to overcome challenges and others such as Brexit preparedness, customs declarations? And given your background, I think you're well qualified to comment on those.
Thank you, Paul. Well, I've noted with interest the high rates of concern in respect of both the bureaucracy and regulatory changes. However, irrespective of whether it's a deal or no deal, there's one certainty is that import and export declarations will be required to be made. And I think somebody mentioned costs earlier on. This is a cost that has to be included for people involved in both the importing and exporting sector. It's suffice to say at this stage that people who are currently purchasing or selling to any of the EU member states, they will all require customs declarations, and this has to be addressed as a matter of urgency. So I suppose starting off, the first thing to do for those people is to have get registered for an EORI number. A customs declaration will not be entertained unless you have an EORI number. So that's the first message that we'll be giving to the trade, and that includes both manufacturers and people involved in the retail sector. In relation to export unlocks, in fact, basically the advice that we're giving to clients is to give them and make them aware of the legal obligations and requirements to ensure that they have none or minimal delays in this regard. We can also offer advice on suitable SOPs that should be in place, fit for purpose for the respective industries, and also for compliance. In relation to compliance, again, one of the pre-requirements for having information on the customs declaration is how they classify their goods. And in my experience as a customs auditor, between 45 and 48% of non-compliant traders have been as a result of misclassification. Now, this has a huge effect on business because, unfortunately, whether you pick a customs commodity code that you either overpay or underpay, you're equally deemed to be non-compliant. So it's key for people in the manufacturing business to get this correct at the outset. We can also advise on the Incoterms or delivery terms that the company intends to use and in respect of any contracts. We look forward to collaboration with Santander in this regard moving forward. While we all look at doom and gloom in relation to where we are at the moment because of the uncertainty, and even at this late stage, we don't know whether we have a deal or no deal. However, I can offer some, let's say, some light of hope for manufacturing people. There are cost-saving mechanisms, which consist of inward processing, outward processing, customs warehousing, and end use, whereby importers can legitimately save money and help their cash flow. And finally, just in relation to your question about preparedness, there are grants available to assist any importer or exporter in the preparation for any post-Brexit activities. I think they're free. So again, it's a matter of signing up and getting registered. If we can assist in any respect in that, we would hopefully do so. So that's my version. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Tom. I think it's fair to say that obviously a lot of manufacturing businesses are awaiting the outcome of the negotiations between the UK and Europe. And even if we do exit the EU in the new year with a deal, I think some of the things, or most of the things you've already talked about, will still be relevant, even if we exit with a deal. And I'm hearing from some manufacturers that perhaps not all of the manufacturers are fully prepared for that, understand even with a deal, we will need to cover those off. And any thoughts on that, Tom? And I'll perhaps bring in Stephen to comment.
Yeah, well, I'll just take it first. Irrespective of deal or no deal, or whether it's a free trade agreement in vogue or not, there will still be the requirement for import and export declarations.
Mm-hmm. But that's pretty categorical. Stephen, Make UK have a view on that?
Yes, we do. So we've been doing a lot of work on this recently for the Cabinet Office, and as it stands at the moment in terms of the manufacturing community, 48% of manufacturers have made no preparations at all, believing a deal means that things stay the same as they do now, and of course they don't. It's not just import and export declarations either, Paul. There's a lot of other detail, whether it's chemical regulations under REACH and where we're going to go with UK REACH, through to the posting of workers, where you have to do negotiations with 27 independent countries rather than one EU for moving service engineers across borders, those sorts of things. A lot of things will change with a deal. And so we're trying to work very closely with the government at the moment to try to get that message out, that manufacturers need to look at their operations in terms of exporting and importing from the EU and need to prepare for change, because with a deal, there's a substantial amount of change that needs to happen on January the 1st.
Good summary, thanks. So let's come back to David as the manufacturer then, and maybe look a little bit further beyond Europe. 22% of manufacturers see reaching new global markets and diversifying operations as obtainable goals within the next 12 months, David. I think you've touched on some of this already. How are Paraloi and your other manufacturing business planning to take advantage of these international opportunities?
So many of our export sales are completed through local agents in country. So we've worked with yourself, Paul, and Mark and Simon in Santander with the in-country experts, the trade club, working with the DTI or UKTI around accessing agents in other territories. And through our broader Nimbus portfolio, where we've got 35 other companies in similar territories and sectors, across those 4 areas, we've worked to identify new agents in the territories where we believe we have the most opportunity. And that's something that has been really successful for us. We did it in South Korea in 2017 and saw a huge uptick in opportunity. We've done it in Egypt. We've done it in Thailand. We've got a quite strong network in Central Europe and Northern America, where we are working with local in-country salespeople, for want of a better word, and they are supporting getting access to the local people who are then placing the order with us, that is leading to the UK export. And that's something that we will continue to progress. And it's a case of identifying which of those countries are the best ones for us to move into and how we find the right agent to support our product portfolio.
So that's a good plan there. I'm just thinking about the earlier point that Tom was mentioning and Stephen elaborated on in terms of preparation for trading in Europe. But how do you think the businesses are set for those changes that come with or without the deal?
For us, we operate in an area where it's a very specialist alloy, so the tariffs don't cause us a challenge. However, in some of our other businesses, like the fenestration business, manufacturing windows and doors, that is a potential issue going over to Ireland, which some of our product does. And there's a lot of people at the moment not going on holiday, and therefore they're spending their money on home improvements. So we are seeing that market huge increase in sales, but it won't last forever.
No, understood. I'm just getting a timeout notification on my screen, which I suspect the rest of you are. We're unfortunately come to the end of our session.